Hello everyone. Today I will discuss about mnemonics of classification of anti-epileptic drug, which is much more important in the CNS of the basic science. Let's start. We must remember this tree diagram in order to remember the mnemonics of anti-epileptic drugs. In first diagram, we saw a BDS doctor is working, and in next diagram we saw a Sanjay Dutt is a Munna Bhai, and in third diagram we saw a Nepal Communist Party. This makes the mnemonics is a BDS Bhai works in CPN. CPN stands for Nepal Communist Party. Let's start single is a let's start with single classification. In this slide we see a benzodiazepam, which example is diazepam, and deoxybarbiturate, which example is pyrimidone, and another is succinamide, which example is ethosuximide. The first letter of these three classification stands for BDS. Let's go to another slide. Here we see barbiturates, which example is phenobarbiturate, and hydratoin, which example is phenytoin. Another aliphatic carboxylic acid, which example is valproic acid or sodium valproate. Another is imidazolpine, which example is carbamazepine. We must remember this carbamazepine is much more important in your board exam as well. The first letter of this classification stands for Bhai. And in this slide we see cyclic GABA-mineralogue, which example is gabapentin. Another is phenyltrazine, which example is lamotrigine. Another is newer drug, which example is Viagra, Batrin, and triperamide, etc. In this, if we take the first letter of this classification, we get CPN. As a whole, we get the classification of anti-epileptic drugs: benzodiazepam, deoxybarbiturate, succinamide, barbiturate, hydratoin, aliphatic carboxylic acid, imidazolpine, cyclic GABA analog, phenyltrazine, and newer drugs. If we take all the first letter of this classification, then we get BDS Bhai works in CPN. Here's the much more important is to remember BDS Bhai and CPN, which we have already discussed in the first slide with the diagram. With this diagram, if we remember this three diagram, then we will remember the classification of epileptics in